Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the U.S. elections. Now, we're only 2 weeks away from the elections of the next U.S. president, be it President Donald Trump or his Democratic rival Joe Biden. We're going to be talking about the chances of both candidates and what will Joe Biden bring if he wins, and what will Trump do actually if he wins. But before we start talking about the U.S. presidential elections, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi today hailing the big strength of Egypt's army, saying it is capable to defend the nation against any enemies. Now, attending the graduation ceremony of the military colleges and institutes, President al-Sisi stressed that Egypt had never been an aggressor and that any attempts to sow discord and intrigues among the people would fail, thanks to the people's awareness. The head of state extended his appreciation to the families of the military college's students for enduring the hardships of their sons to take the responsibility of protecting the nation. The president reiterated that it is important for military graduates to cooperate with conscripts inside military units. The military colleges and institutes held their graduation ceremony for the academic year 2020 today. The ceremony started with a show of choppers in the skies of Cairo carrying the national flag and flags of the main military departments. Participants in the ceremony, which coincides with celebrations marking the 47th anniversary of the October War victory, took part in combat and self-defense shows. Addressing the ceremony, military college head General Ashraf Salem Zahir hailed sacrifices of the Egyptian martyrs for the nation. He also praised the General Command of the Armed Forces and its constant support, which he said stems from a deep vision and will. General Zahir called on graduates to stay brave and determined for the protection of the nation against any crises. And the Egyptian expatriates are to vote on Wednesday, tomorrow, in the first phase of the parliamentary elections. Now, voters are to send their ballots through fast mail to guarantee they arrive at embassies between the 21st and the 23rd of October. Minister of Immigration Nabila Makram said a team from the ministry is working around the clock to receive inquiries about the voting process abroad. She said the National Election Authority allowed for the fast mail mechanism due to the coronavirus pandemic fears. Also today, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received a phone call from his South Korean counterpart, Moon Jae-in. And during their telephone conversation, President al-Sisi hailed the deep and strategic ties that bind the two nations, as well as their joint partnership. The president expressed Egypt's desire to boost trade relations with South Korea in light of the joint developmental mega projects being currently implemented nationwide. In this regard, the head of state asserted that such projects would offer promising investments and trade opportunities, especially in the Suez Canal economic zone. For his part, the South Korean president praised the two countries' joint cooperation and expressed hope to enhance these ties with Egypt at all levels, especially in the fields of investment and trade, in light of the economic growth Egypt is witnessing. Also, upgrading the mechanism of joint cooperation, as well as changing expertise and means of combating the coronavirus pandemic. And they also discussed a number of international and regional issues of mutual concern. And finally, U.S. President Donald Trump heads to the battleground state of Pennsylvania on Tuesday with hopes of rekindling the 11th hour surge of support that powered his surprise 2016 victory. With 2 weeks to go until Election Day, Trump and Joe Biden adopted radically different strategies to secure votes. The Republican incumbent ramped up his appearances, and the Democratic challenger opted to hunker down at home. After two campaign rallies on Monday in Arizona, the 74-year-old Trump heads Tuesday to Pennsylvania, making a new push in the battleground state seen as vital to his re-election bid, although a rare appearance by First Lady Melania Trump was called off at the last minute. The former vice president, 77, meanwhile, did not schedule any public events for the second day running. There is little visible evidence that the Democrat is really flagging in terms of voter support. 2 days before the final televised debate with the Republican president, he appears to be preparing at home. And while both candidates are prepping for their second debate in a few days, let's check out this report regarding the hotly contested elections between the President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden, and we'll be right back.
U.S. voters head to polls on November 3rd to deliver the verdict on President Donald Trump's divisive presidency. The Republican incumbent faces a tough re-election battle amid the world's deadliest coronavirus outbreak and an economic downturn. He takes on his veteran Democratic challenger Biden, best known as Barack Obama's former vice president. Trump is running with Vice President Mike Pence, while Biden's pick Kamala Harris is the first woman of color on a vice presidential ticket. The two rivals are urging supporters to vote early ahead of the election's date. In Nevada, Trump said early voting is underway, so get out and vote. Similarly, Biden asked people to vote as soon as possible and keep the incredible momentum going. A record more than 30 million American voters have already voted due to concern about crowding on Election Day. Harris, who has stalled her campaigning after an aide tested positive, was back on ground by traveling to Florida Monday, where she marked the state's first lady of early in-person voting. While addressing a rally in Michigan, Trump attacked Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, for imposing restrictions to slow the speed of coronavirus, and made light of a right-wing plot uncovered by the FBI to kidnap her, to which the crowd responded by yelling, "Lock her up." Amid a raging virus, struggling economy, and unrest over racial injustice, President Trump focused on his re-election campaign, recasting some of his failures as a candidate as active choices during his rallies. With just 2 weeks to go before the elections, Biden has a 10-point advantage over Trump nationally. Polls say Biden's chance of winning the Electoral College are around 9 in 10, or 91%, while his chance of winning the most votes is higher than 19 in 20, or 99%. Biden leads by 17 percentage points in the Opinion Research Guardian poll, 16 points in CNN poll, and 11 points in NBC Wall Street Journal poll. The last incumbent president to suffer such deficits was the last incumbent president to lose, George W. Bush, beaten by Bill Clinton in 1992.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here in the studio by Ambassador Jilan, Allam, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Pleasure to be here.
Your Excellency, now, this happens once every 4 years when the whole world is focusing on the U.S. elections. Yeah. Now, the Republican, President Donald Trump, and the Democratic Joe Biden, they're the contenders this time around. The significance of this U.S. elections and what could it determine for not just the U.S. but the whole world in such a critical time during the whole coronavirus pandemic?
Well, this is a very interesting election, it is, in terms of the nature of the environment that is prevailing in the United States and in the world at large because of COVID-19. And COVID-19 and so many other elements, but basically this is what the concern is about.
Yes.
I think it's a very not only interesting but exciting also election for a good number of reasons. To start with, this is the 59th election in the history, a presidential election in the history of the United States. The incumbent in the 45th president. The vice president incumbent is the 48th vice president. So it is a tough election. It is a tough election because so many has been promised, so much has been achieved, and all of a sudden, so many problems erupt in the middle of that. And basically, I think it was COVID which imposes itself now on the election scene. Why is the United States important? It's the third largest country in terms of territory. 9,600,000, I think, 50 square kilometers. It's the third largest country in the world in terms of population, 331, 32 millions. It's the first country in the world strongest in terms of economy, GDP. It's the strongest in terms of military potential. It's the strongest with areas of influence and interest of influence in the world. So, and it is always expected that the United States will have a position on any marginal or basic problem in the world. So there is a lot at stake now in the world. And then the economy is going through very troubling time. The world economy now is going through very troubling time. There is a lot of competition. China started with its COVID-19 kind of resurrection plan, and it was able to contain it somehow. We don't know the details. Actually, it is a very intriguing, this pandemic is a very intriguing, has a very intriguing story to be told later. And so far we don't know really what it is, what it affects, where is it coming from, the kind of remedies and drugs that is needed for it. Some say, well, like in the United States, for example, the son-in-law of the president, who is his consultant, so he comes and says, well, the American people are not used to be locked up, so we cannot. So this is why we are not using any precautions. Europe now is facing what they called, the press in Europe called a tsunami of coronavirus cases. We have in the world 40 million, 40 million cases of infected. These are the recorded cases. All right, and we have I think it's 1.1 million deaths because of that. In the United States alone, we have 8 million out of the 40 million. And 220,000 after death out of the 1.1 death. So this is a real traumatic number to look at when it comes. So this is why President Trump now is having this kind of a polemic situation. Should he succumb to the pressures to succumb to COVID-19? Should he not? They have different vision. So whatever they decide is going to affect not only the United States, but the whole world.
What about him actually testing positive and being administered into a hospital and then released and then tested negative? Does that play a role in the campaigning and the electoral process?
Well, again, I mean, it is very difficult to decide or to take a decision upon what comes in the press, in the media. You see, all of a sudden, the president who doesn't wear a mask and all his assistants, you know, who don't wear masks, most of them have been infected positive. And all of a sudden, the president is requested by the US Navy hospital. 4 days, he could not take it anymore, and they decided to go out, and they said, well, he is okay, he is negative. So we don't really know, was he really positive then turned negative, or was it taken because as a precaution because everybody around him was testing positive? We don't know. But we do know that there is some kind of a reluctance of accepting the idea. And we see this in the different states. Different states have different ways of looking. Some, but most of the US states are reluctant and do not like very much and do not encourage the idea of taking precautions and just going in mask or staying home or all of that. Because Europe did that during the summer holidays. Now they are having this tsunami of with winter coming in. So we don't know how this winter is going to be as far as Europe and the United States is going to be. So now the whole world, I mean, we are only 13 days away from the US elections. We have already like 17 million Americans who have already casted their votes, because different states have different ways of casting their votes. Some are allowed to do it by mail, some are allowed to do it by just depositing a request to vote, some have to can do it in person earlier, but mostly it's going to be Tuesday, the 3rd of November. This is going to be D-Day, and for me D-Day is Democracy Day. Because the United States has always been looked at as the hub, the mother, the role model country for democracy. So their D-Day, and this time is really, really different. And so D-Day is Democracy Day, 3rd of November, 2020.
Well, Ambassador Allam, you've mentioned that it is different this time around, and it does seem different in the manner they're both campaigning. So today, President Trump is going to go and campaign and make public appearances in Pennsylvania. However, Joe Biden's still staying at home. He's not doing much of public appearances, and he's just staying put and maybe prepping for the second debate, which is quite different and quite new for the two US candidates vying for the presidency. How do you evaluate both strategies? I mean, will that help Joe Biden to actually have a better debate, or maybe go ahead in the polls, or get more voters just staying put? How do you view the difference in strategies, and what do you imagine would the result be?
Well, you know, I mean, pursuing and following the media again, because this is, I mean, this is the mega source of all the news. It is very strange. It's really very strange, because many part of the media tells you, well, definitely the Democrats, Joe Biden is going to carry it. I mean, President Trump is gone. So he holds no more hope. And yet he goes fighting and campaigning and doing all what he is doing. Are the Democrats taking these polls seriously and saying, well, we will carry it over and it's done, we don't have to do much about it? I'm not sure that this is the right thing to do or the right way to think. I think that they are preparing maybe for the next debate. And the next debate, funny enough, that the organization that is doing the preparing and holding this debate decided to put on mute the microphone, the speaker of the other candidate.
Because they keep interrupting each other.
Because they keep interrupting each other. So they decided on that. So already President Trump says, well, you see, they are biased against me. But there must be some kind of organizing the debate, because this has been really a very exceptional way of leading, of dealing, actually. I mean, for lots of people, I think for lots of people around the world, they are a little bit disappointed at the way this particular election is being run, undertaken, looked at. This is the first time in the history of the US election that the two candidates are over 70 years. First time ever. And just another statistic that should any of them continue his term of 4 years, that he or he will be the oldest president ever of who has sat in the White House. So all of this is putting pressure on the two candidates and putting pressure on the two sides. Should we expect surprises during the next couple of weeks? Maybe. We don't know. I mean, we have been surprised by the Abraham Accords a couple of weeks ago. We don't know what might come up. I think President Trump is very much gifted in terms of coming up with surprises, instant surprises. Joe Biden, I think, is taking it maybe a little bit quieter. I hope that the Democrats, I mean, I don't have a preference. I mean, in Egypt, we will deal with whoever sits in the White House.
Yes.
And I think we have become familiar enough with President Trump, and I think with Joe Biden, I think we know where the Democrats stand. But again, when a president sits in the White House, lots of things change, and events impose on changes, and requests sometimes changes. So we will see what happens. But let me give you an example.
Please.
The 2016 elections between Mr. Trump and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton got 65 million votes. Trump got 62 million votes. So there was a difference. She overran him by 3 million, and yet she lost because of the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a number of votes that are put on every state. So whoever wins in the state, whoever of the two contenders, gets the whole, regardless, even if he wins by 1 vote extra, he gets the whole Electoral College. So Mr. Trump got the Electoral College over Hillary Clinton. So he won the presidency.
Do you think it will come down to this time
A
around?
lot of people, analysts, commentators, researchers, universities researchers are afraid and are concerned that we might face the same scenario again. What are the blue states? What are the red states? We will have to wait a little bit further and see where do we fall. But these are all question marks that are there on the table for the two contenders and their party. Of course, there is a lot of discrepancy, and there are many, not too many, but some of the Republican senators who are a little bit afraid of having President Trump again in the White House. Some supporters from not the Jewish lobby, but the evangelists are basically a little bit wary that how things have been going during the last year, during the COVID and so on. So there are concerns on both sides. And I do believe and I do think that these concerns are being discussed heavily now. And I think the discussion will go even further, even hotter, let us say, and heated a little bit along the road. Because of the 331 million Americans population, we have 239 million eligible voters. So this is a lot of votes. 2016 presidential election, we got around 139 million voters. Everybody, all the analysts, all the media expect this time to have 160, 170 million, because things are getting too close. And maybe some say, well, you know, the wind is blowing behind Trump, meaning he's being pushed again to the White House. And some are saying, well, the Democrats are not working hard enough, but they might be overtaken by the lack of enthusiasm on their part to, but this didn't happen in 2016. They got more votes, more popular votes, but they couldn't carry the electoral vote. So there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of intrigues, there are a lot of guesses when it comes to all that. So we follow that with a lot of interest.
We'll definitely wait and see. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 2 weeks away, and as it stands, actually Trump is trailing behind Biden, but still time is of the essence, as Her Excellency mentioned, it could come to the last day and the electoral colleges vote. So let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
A consistent polling lead for Biden has raised Democrats' hopes, but fears persist that any victory could be disputed by President Donald Trump, plunging the U.S. into crises. With more than 30 million votes already cast their ballots, Trump is struggling to find a coherent closing argument for the U.S. presidential elections, as opinion polls put him in danger of humiliating defeat by Democrat Joe Biden. Long queues have formed across the country for early in-person voting, a sign that this year could see a record turnout in spite or perhaps because of a coronavirus pandemic that has killed more than 215,000 Americans and put millions out of work. But there could still be surprises before Elections Day on November 3rd, and the fears persist that in the event of a Biden victory, Trump could plunge the world's oldest constitutional democracy into crisis by disputing the results in court, spreading conspiracy theories online and mobilizing militant supporters in the streets. Trump, who's 74, has attempted to portray 77-year-old Biden as mentally declining and a puppet of the radical left. This week, he tweeted a decorated image of Biden in a wheelchair at a nursing home and claimed, simply put, it's a choice between a socialist nightmare and the American dream. Trump has also tried hard to change the subject from the pandemic to cultural wars or law and order, but the virus has proved an implacable foe. His campaign has been just as chaotic as in 2016. Its manager, Brad Parscale, who was demoted and then resigned after being hospitalized following reports that he threatened to harm himself at his Florida home. The campaign has been forced to withdraw advertising from battleground states after running low on cash, even as Biden breaks fundraising records. As he runs out of time, Trump could become even more reckless in his efforts to alter the trajectory of the race. Trump appears to be in hemorrhaging support among two crucial voting blocs. One is elderly people who were crucial for his victory over Hillary Clinton in states such as Florida in 2016. The other group deserted Trump in a suburban women, apparently rejecting his vulgar insults and shows of mechanism regarding the coronavirus. Trump has appeared confident of the re-election at the start of the year based on his economic record, but COVID-19 and his persistent downplaying of it wreaked the havoc. The president himself was hospitalized with the virus earlier this month, but has since recovered and is back on the campaign trail. But his rallies do not soak up media coverage like they used to, with some commentators suggesting that the Carnival Barker Act, so novel in 2016, has become routine and even boring. His need to hold them in states such as the Iowa and Georgia, traditionally safe Republican territory, suggests he is on the defensive.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Ambassador Allam. Now, Your Excellency, if we start looking at the U.S. sort of foreign policy over the past few years under the presidency of Trump, and what could we be expecting for the next term, be it Trump or Joe Biden? You've mentioned that we already know what Trump is like, his policies, and Joe Biden, we can assume, being the vice president for Barack Obama, so we wouldn't be far off from his strategies. Probably it would be a classical Barack Obama democratic sort of strategy. Now, we've seen a lot of moves by President Trump in regarding strengthening the relations between Israel and the Middle East, namely Bahrain and the UAE. Now, these things, and actually taking also Sudan off of the sponsors of terrorist list. Now, would you be expecting that this is something that would be in Trump's favor, winning on the Israeli lobby in the US? Would you imagine Joe Biden following suit with that? How will that change? How's this going to affect the race?
You have raised a lot of questions, and let me try to dissect them. To start with, I think that President Trump was interested, or is interested very much, in supporting and sustaining Israel relations with countries of the Gulf, basically. So this is one element, an important element, and I think he did put a lot of pressure on Gulf countries. Let's remember that Bahrain hosted the economic, they called it a workshop, it wasn't a workshop, regarding the deal of the century, President Trump, a vision of what the Palestinian-Israeli conflict should be, or future should be look like. So it is, basically it is the Gulf, and we understand why. Sudan is a different story. Sudan was taken off or delisted from the United States list of countries supporting or sponsors of terrorism, because it agreed to pay in compensation $335 million to the families of the U.S. citizens who have been affected by the two bombings from the bin Laden followers of the two embassies of the United States in Kenya and in Uganda. So this is another story. But there is a little string attached to that, and why not establish relations with Israel also? Of course, there are constitutional restraints on the transitional government in Sudan. They cannot do that immediately. I don't suppose that it will not happen, but it will happen maybe in good time, a little bit later on. But the good thing is that they have been freed from that area of terrorism accusations, and now they can have loans, they can have grants, they can have aid, so they can just go through this transition period, hopefully, and we certainly hope the best for them. Going back to the two Gulf agreements, or the Abraham Accords, the UAE and Bahraini one, and why? I was not exactly convinced that they were peace accords. I mean, there are no joint borders between the UAE or Bahrain with Israel. They are not at war. They have never been at war with Israel. They're just like every other Arab country, and a whole number of countries in the world who decided not to have countries with Israel, because it is the last country who occupies territories in the world. So they decided on that. So it is an establishment of diplomatic relations, having normal relations with a country. And the two are sovereign countries. It is their interest, if it is in their interest, so they decided to do that. Bearing in mind that they will undertake also efforts in order to help. Their view is that if we have good relations and establish fundamental relations with Israel in different areas of common interest, that will help them talk in favor of the Palestinians when they decided to talk to the Israelis so that they can have this two-state solution. Hopefully, we can do that. They can do that, and we can do that also, or help them to do that. Now, why did the United Nations need Israel to have relations with Israel? The Arab Emirates is a country we know all, we realize all, is savvy for technology. They love technology. And it has affected them as a hub for technology. They are the only Arab country who have nuclear plant now. They sent
an astronaut to the
yes, they have gas, they have oil. The Emirates has a population of 10 million. Out of the 10 million, only 1.1 are of Emirati origin. The 8.9 million are expats or immigrants. So, naturally, the 1.1 million having the resources, the financial resources that allow them to invest it in technology, in water management, in cyber, in space, in trade, in creating jobs, in development of joint.
Yes.
Now they have, so in medicine, in education. If they do that, then the 1.1 million in artificial intelligence, the 1.1 million might not really need the presence of the 8.8 or 9 million other, maybe some, not all, because they are able to conduct their own affairs in a different way. We are coming. Remember that in the first part of our presentation or talk, we have been speaking about the economy in the world, development economy shrinking.
Yes.
The planet is aching with a lot of people with needs job. We need more time for allowing the planet to breathe. We need to take care of the environment. We need to take care of research. We need to care. So all of this, the UAE and the Bahrain decided that this is a priority for them.
Well, do you think, Your Excellency, that this would actually be better for or give Trump a bigger chance in his race?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was some kind of a, well, you were right telling Trump and the world. Well, you were right actually in asking us and presenting to us the opportunity to have this kind of, to open up the floor, for us to have normal relations, diplomatic relations. And funny enough that it is going at a flamboyant race. So 28 flights decided, weekly flights between Israel and the Emirates already.
Yes.
And the first commercial flight from the Emirates, Al-Ittihad, Tehran Al-Ittihad, which is the formal airline of the Emirates, landed in Tel Aviv airport. The Minister of Finance of the Emirates signed with Israeli counterparts, American counterparts, establishing a fund, a joint fund between the three, with $3 billion. Decided.
Yes. Well, Your Excellency, because you're talking about numbers and money.
Yes.
Okay, if we're talking about that, how about the China war? It's affected the whole world.
Yes.
Do you think that Americans are benefiting from this trade tension between the US and China? Do you think Joe Biden, if he actually won, would he continue on or try and maintain this sort of conflict, or would he just flip the whole thing over?
Well, it does depend on a lot of issues. It does depend how is the economy going. the IMF issued a report, I think it was a couple of days ago, saying, we think that we need a new Bretton Woods agreement, a different one, because the international economy is going through very strenuous times, and we need a new agreement. Now there is no more communist and versus liberal economies. The economy in the world is open economy. This is why we have this very strong fight for who is going to be the candidate that will take over the chairmanship, to be the next Director General of the World Trade Organization. So, I mean, trade, development, technology is going to be the next war. Actually, we are in this war. These are the beginnings. But it is not a war where planes are bombing and cannons and around. No, it's all a cyber, a virtual war. It is going there. And this is why in Egypt, we keep saying, well, you know, G4 war, G5 war. No, the war is here. It is here, but it did not really hit us that much. What hit us, what happened during the last 40, 50 years, this is where not much has been done, and we need to do a lot to catch up with the world and to do that. Because I love to see Egyptians living a decent life.
Definitely.
It hurts me, you know, to see people who live in misery in Egypt. So I think we need to do that. But the world is at the big economies, the big countries are already at war. But it is the Cold War yet.
Your Excellency, just one final question because we're running out of time. Now, you've mentioned that Egypt has really good relations with the US administration and President Donald Trump, and it will have a good, strong relations with the US if Joe Biden won the elections as well. But what about, as you've mentioned, the major economies, the European superpowers, Germany, France, the UK? Now, we've seen Trump withdrawing from NATO, withdrawing from the Iranian nuclear deal. How do you see their attitude supporting which candidate, Trump, Biden? Who would they want to have for the next 4 years?
President Trump is basically against multilateralism in general, all right? And he is against multilateralism when it costs him money. So be it NATO, be it the UN, be it UNESCO, be it the climate agreement, all of that. Iranian is a different issue. It's not a matter of money, it's a matter of security, and Israel not really accepting it. Even the Gulf countries did not accept it. When we should remember that President Trump invited the Gulf leaders to go to Camp David at the time to agree, and he did not get their blessing on that. So there is a problem. But speaking, the Trump administration, not administration, but President Trump in person, is against multilateralism, is against spending money. I mean, he is bringing home all the U.S. forces abroad from Germany. I mean, Germany is traditionally a close ally of the United States. He is taking away from the 30,000 soldiers, U.S. soldiers who are there, he took already 12,000. So the Germany is upset and are not very happy about that. So I don't think that even in the case of Europe, which is facing coronavirus in a very intense fashion, which is facing, because of that, a very intense kind of pressure on their economies, I don't think that they are really in a position to say, well, we prefer this one or this one. I think they will deal with whoever sits in the White House with the same principles, or maybe a different set of principles. With that.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely it is a closely contested elections, and we're going to be following up this run for the U.S. presidency for the next 2 weeks. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Ambassador Jilan Allam, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, always a pleasure having you with us.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.